Hello again, this is Clint. Welcome to Sweetcast. Before we jump into the video today, I just wanted to let everybody know that this Thursday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'll be hosting a live stream with Peter Samedi of Alterna Comics. And I reached out to him, sent him a direct message. We talked a little bit, and he suggested that we do a live stream together. And so I am pleased as punch to be hosting that. I think that'll be a great time. I really respect Alterna Comics. If you haven't, I already made a video about why I love Alterna Comics. I feel like I could make a whole video series of why I love Alterna. So check it out. This should be really interesting. We're going to talk about submissions and crowdfunding. All right, for the video today, there was some craziness on Twitter. I had a little bit of fun just sort of poking the bear. And by the bear, I mean SJW Spider-Man. I did the video yesterday about some of the nonsense that he was posting about diversity in comics and deplatforming and all that kind of nonsense. And so I asked him where he drew the line. What would make him happy? What is his end goal? Because this obsession seems relentless. And of course, SJW Spider-Man doesn't really say all that much. He's not interested in having a debate or even a discussion or anything like that. He'll say a few words, but mostly you'll get all these other randos dogpiling on you. So some of the tactics that they use, this is unsurprising if you've talked to any social justice advocates for any amount of time, but it's almost like rapid fire tweeting. And so there's all these responses and all these accusations sort of flying around in the air. And a lot of those accusations are totally just insane. And some of those accusations were, here's one at the top here. Richard Meyer is totally guilty of hate speech. You know this, and being a supporter, love that he picks on marginalized communities and through works like Ironsights calls for violence against them. Now, if this was the only tweet, there are like several things in this tweet that are so wrong that it would be hard to address them. But they hit you with not only this, but like it's like a shotgun pattern of lies all at once. It's just spread out with all these different accusations. And so you have to choose wisely and pick which route you want to go down. Now, I've been having these conversations long enough to know that trying to defend yourself, if somebody calls you a hateful person, or if they call you racist or a transphobe or whatever, the burden of proof is not on you. They're throwing out a baseless accusation with literally no evidence. So you don't need to address it. It's nonsense. It's not your responsibility to explain or to prove that you're not any of those things. The proper response would be to tell them that they are a liar or, they're evil or something. But what you don't want to do is be playing the game of trying to defend their baseless accusations, because that's how they scare people into silence, or they'll try and hopefully they're trying to trick you to stumble over your words. So I don't play that game. But what I did pick out is he said guilty of hate speech. Now, I see this term brought up so much by Anti-Comicsgate and, social justice warriors in general. And it's kind of amazing to me for how often they use that term, hate speech. They have no idea what hate speech means. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I have no legal background. And it's easy enough to do a quick Google search and find out what hate speech is and what it is not. So what hate speech is not is it's not a crime. They'll have you believe that it is somehow this unpardonable sin, and that the courts will throw you in jail for it, or that it's some kind of speech that's not protected by law. And in fact, that's not the truth. The Supreme Court has already ruled on it, and there's precedent set that hate speech, even if you're saying the most vile of hate speech, you are protected by the First Amendment. So hate speech is not a crime. Now, what is a crime is incitement of violence, and that it has a very specific meaning, and there's a really high bar for something to count as incitement of violence. However, I wanted to share this, and this is a problem. It's because they're equating words with violence, and this is dangerous. This is a dangerous road to go down, but there are so many that are willing to go down it. So here's the worst of it. Because, if you don't, we can certainly start calling for your extermination. We can certainly call for your violent expulsion, which I'm all for. if you're saying I should have the same right to do that as Richie. Okay, so this is a massive misunderstanding and conflating. They compare things that just aren't the same. Criticizing a comic book or even calling somebody names, and don't get me wrong, Richard Meyer did not, to my knowledge, call anybody just blatant racial slurs. But even if he did, anybody that does say those words, those unspeakable words, it's still protected by the First Amendment. So rather than, I have no desire to defend every word that anybody says. I'll defend my own words. That's my own responsibility, if I see fit to defend my words. But to equate calling somebody names with calling for mass extermination, this is crazy talk. This is insane. So I looped Nick Rekieta in this with Rekieta Law, and I would really be interested to hear what he has to say. We'll see. I know he's got a lot of stuff going on, but I'd love to see him address this concept. And I would say, based off of the reading that I did, even this does not count as inciting violence. This is obviously, a crazy person that has just said something very regrettable. Okay, so part of this tactic of equating speech and violence, it's so dangerous, but it's so prevalent. Don't buy into it. It doesn't matter what they say. Speech is not violence. And, this is from NPR, and even NPR says the Supreme Court has ruled that hate speech is protected under the Constitution. But what about social media? Several alleged perpetrators of mass shootings have ranted online before acting. Okay, so these are two different things. Yeah, if you say something and you break Twitter's terms of services, they can kick you off their platform or whatever they want to do. They are a private business. I think that they are way too fast and loose with that principle because they will extend it to political speech rather than just hate speech. But that umbrella of hate speech does not have a clear definition. In fact, it's an ever-growing and expanding definition. So of course you're not going to be able to abide by these made-up hate speech laws because there is no test. There's no for sure definition of what is and what isn't allowed, and that's why the First Amendment protects it. So next time someone tells you that you are committing hate speech is not a crime. I know that you're not participating in hate speech. They like to say that because it's very emotional and it makes you feel bad. Am I really saying something hateful? No, they're applying it way too generously. So I actually tried to find of an instance where somebody in America was convicted of convicted of inciting violence, because that was one of the allegations here made by a random Twitter person, that Richard Meyer's book Iron Sights was a call for violence. And I did find some cases where people were charged with inciting violence or even convicted, but those convictions were overturned, or in this case, this is actually from the Charlottesville riots, I guess. There were some people that were charged. I think it was 3 guys were charged, it looks like 4 people were charged with inciting violence. And as far as I know, that case has not been settled yet. So I will be interested to see what happens. Now, this is actually a really similar case to one that had happened. I could see it being a little bit, I haven't seen all the evidence, but I could see it being worse. But back in 1969, there's the Brandenburg versus Ohio case. And this was actually a KKK member that said some awful things about violence, and it looks like the quote here is possible that there might have been some revengeance taken. Okay, so he was convicted, and then the Supreme Court overturned that conviction, and they said that even this was covered by the First Amendment. So the test that is taken here legally is, first, the speech is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action. Now, like before we go on, imminent means something. It means that it is for sure going to happen. And imminent is used in other legal things. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I mean, you can look this stuff up. Imminent means that something is going to happen, that it's more than likely to happen. It is most certainly going to happen. So like if you are, some reckless person points a gun at you or a weapon of some kind and they are like charging at you, you are in imminent danger. If somebody says that they should get their weapon and cause you harm, that is not imminent. It's just a threat. So the second part is that the speech is likely to incite or produce such action. Now, by this test, even the insane Twitter people, they say that they're calling for extermination. This is a call for genocide. First off, this is not imminent, because when is this pretend genocide going to happen? Obviously, it's not going to happen, because this is just one rando on the internet. And second is, it's very unlikely that this is going to cause harm. So it's not going to pass the test. So the next time somebody says that words are violence, or that you're inciting violence, there's a very specific definition for what that is. And honestly, I mean, if you can tell me of somebody that was convicted and it was upheld by the Supreme Court, I'd love to hear it. I looked around quite a bit and I wasn't able to find one of those cases. To me, it's extremely rare to really be convicted and that conviction upheld that you were inciting violence. Now, a lot of this comes from microaggressions. If you're unfamiliar with the term, you're probably blissfully unaware. But microaggressions are basically little words that are said that can be annoying or hurtful. Now, it's funny because this is a blog that from Huffington Post that is an opinion, and they use the term "death by 1,000 cuts." Each microaggression is a small, tiny cut, and they build up together to create some massive injustice. Now, death by 1,000 cuts is not, it's not just this author that is using that term. This is all throughout academia. Death by 1,000 cuts is a term that goes hand in hand with microaggressions. And so this is, again, people taking cues from education, and they're sort of recycling that and trickling it through culture. And at its basis, microaggressions are exactly what it sounds like. It is comparing words to violence. It's making a justification for words, saying words, and not even like mean words. These are like maybe putting your foot in your mouth or saying something a little awkward. They're comparing those to violence. Not just comparing, they are saying that they are indeed an act of aggression or an act of violence. And so I think that this is a big time indicator of why we have so many people saying that somebody like Richard Meyer is committing acts of violence or inciting violence, and that's because the definition of violence has been diluted so much. All right, so I wanted to check out this video on microaggressions and how they're like mosquito bites. This is just like saying death by 1,000 cuts. They tried to make it cutesy, and I think when I looked this up, it says it's like a fusion comedy. Every time I see these supposed comedies like Squirrel Girl, it's just ideology wrapped in like this really thin veneer of cuteness, and that makes it so that it's funny. I don't really understand that. So I didn't watch this video, but I thought I could just give you my honest reaction as we go through it.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem...
Oh, you're so well-spoken.
Just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Okay, you see that? Death by 1,000 cuts, same thing. You say something like you're so well-spoken. It doesn't matter about the context. If it was something annoying that you didn't want to hear, then it is violence. It is the same as violence.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while...
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland?
Sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal.
Okay, yeah, where are you really from? This is one that gets brought up a lot. And honestly, I haven't heard people ever word it that way. They just say, ask where you're from, or they ask what your heritage is. Most people aren't that stupid to fall into this generalized stereotype of a mildly racist person. But whatever, we'll just give you the benefit of the doubt and let you have that one.
The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date.
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
Okay, I don't think this would happen in a non-Western country, honestly. If you were in another country and you were learning another language, or somebody was learning another language and they gave you a compliment of saying, hey, your Japanese is really good, or your Russian is really good, or whatever it might be. If you're learning that language, I mean, that is a compliment. If you're offended by that, I would look inward. There's something wrong if you're offended by that. Now, don't get me wrong. There can be all sorts of backhanded compliments or just slights between one person to another, but that's part of being a human. And so to assume, like they had in the last picture, that only some people are getting the mosquito bites and others aren't, this is a massive and I think false assumption. No person can understand another person better than that person can understand them, if that makes sense. It's a two-way street. The distance between X and Y is the same whether you're leaving from X or leaving from Y. So to pretend like you understand what it's like to be every race is false. This is a false comparison, and this little mosquito thing, I know they're trying to make it sound like this is supposed to be comedy, this is funny, but we're teaching you a life lesson. What you're doing is you're actually making an entirely false comparison between a blood-sucking bug or insect. Mosquitoes are insects, I think, right? And a well-meaning person that is just trying to have a conversation.
It's me.
Going grocery shopping.
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
Commuting to work.
So when are you gonna have a baby?
Watching TV.
Wow, everything happens for a reason. Okay, well, like, what exactly were they talking about? Again, you're making assumptions. When are you going to have the baby? Wow, I mean, if the person's not pregnant, I guess. But, yeah, like, I can speak from first-hand experience. I've never been pregnant, but my wife has 3 times. And sometimes people can be annoying to pregnant women, or they get annoyed about it. So what? That's just part of life. You can walk away. It's not violence.
We have to keep the Redskins' name. It's part of our culture and history.
Or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
You know,
Yeah, I have a very strong doubts that this happens all the time. I really, really don't. I'm going to call you on that.
John, give me shopping advice. I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day.
Can I touch your hair?
Multiple times a day.
So pretty. Can
Can I touch
your
it,
hair?
please? Can I please?
Is fucking annoying. And makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
You know what's really annoying to me is when people tell me that they want to call for my extermination because they're all for it. That's annoying to me. I think that's a little bit different than somebody telling you that you're beautiful or wanting to have a conversation. Now, all these little terms that come, honestly, I've never heard people talk that way. A lot of this is maybe based on one or a few people that put their foot in their mouth and they say things in a really awkward way. We all know people that are like that, but to apply that to an entire race of people is not helpful, and it's actually very dividing. So I'm kind of done with this video. If you want to go through it, go for it. Look it up. Let me know what you think about these microaggressions, and I've got to ask you to please subscribe. I could use your subscription to the channel. It's really helpful. If you would, please like it. And if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, I am @CastSweet, and you'll be able to stay up to date on everything that's going on with my comic book Downcast and future videos. So thank you very much. I will see you next time.